Please be seated. For many years of my life, I have been involved in the hiring of various people, either directly for positions that I might have available, or in consultation with different industries and companies who were doing these sorts of things. And it's a pretty straightforward process. You decide that you're going to need to hire someone for a position, then you look at the needs of that position, the particular tasks that need to be addressed, and you begin to put together a job description. And you paint out a picture in that job description of the tasks for them and something of the beginning of how that person will be. Now, as you do that, you may also begin to daydream about who might fill that position and how that person would function, perhaps on a team or in other ways. So there are ways you begin to tease through this and to think about it and to prepare for bringing someone on board. Then you set out and you publicize through whatever is the most appropriate way this position. And as you do that, you begin to get the applications in, and you set those applications against the job descriptions and your image. And you begin to narrow down into a small group of people. Usually at some point as you narrow them down, you get to the point where you do the dreaded background check. That's where you find out what they've done, what they haven't done, and who knows about it. It's more dreaded for the candidates than it is for the people who order those background checks. And that information then goes in and is filtered through. And then you make your decision about who to hire. God does not abide by human resource principles. I don't know if you're aware of that. But if you look throughout the Old and New Testament, God has hired people. He has called people who are not, in our minds, the best candidates. Things like thieves, murderers, all sorts of people God hires for the positions. I became aware that this was true when I was going through the ordination process, and I figured if God was calling me to be ordained to ministry, God doesn't go through traditional channels, and he may not have very good taste. But the reality is that God doesn't abide by those sorts of rules that you and I think are best practices. And if you want to look at one that is really a good example of this, look at our gospel today because it talks about Mary. Those of you who were in one of the services a couple of weeks ago when Father Ingleby was here from Honduras, El Hogar, and he talked about how that the average age of first pregnancy in Honduras is 13 to 14. And he put that image beside the image of Mary because we believe that Mary was about that age. She was 13, maybe 14. Not a good candidate to be a mother, wouldn't you say? Not just that, but she had no experience. She doesn't fit with our grid on that. There's no evidence that she even signed up with a babysitting agency and did any babysitting. No evidence that she had experience with kids. Yet God hired her called her. And what a beautiful story it is. It's a beautiful story. And our reading today is beautiful. And had we gone on and read the additional optional reading for the gospel this morning, it's Mary's Magnificat. It's beautiful, beautiful words. But our image of Mary is a painted image of a very adult-looking young woman who looks very grounded. And we've come to raise her up throughout history and put her up on a pedestal and call her the Mother of God. I think it's a wonderful image. It's a beautiful image. But you know me. I want to challenge it this morning. I want to challenge it a little bit. For you see, one of the things we encounter in the beauty of this story is that all of these words were written by men. Have you ever wondered how the story would be different if one of the gospel writers was a woman? See, men, we idolize pregnant women, in part because we can't do it. I could imagine that if a woman had written one of the Gospels and had talked about this story in particular, this birth narrative, there would have been something in there about swollen ankles and late-night cravings that sent Joseph to Mickey D's. And you can bet that there would have been some very pointed comments about riding that donkey to Bethlehem. You see, she wasn't the ideal candidate, but we have a way of raising her up to be something beyond us. That term, Mother of God, is something of a twist in a translation of an early phrase, an early word that was used to refer to her. The Greek word is Theotokos. And it was early on translated not as Mother of God, but of God-bearer. The bearer of God. And to this day, if you are around anyone of the Eastern Orthodox tradition or Russian Orthodox tradition, you will hear them talk about Theotokos. And when they talk about Theotokos, they talk about Mary as God-bearer. And I like that image. It's one that has resonated with me now for many years, because I think that it helps to bring Mary home to us. Because you see, I think Theotokos applies not just to her, but to all of humanity. I think it applies to you and to me. And it's a dangerous kind of shift to begin to think in these terms. Because if we begin to see each other as God-bearers, then it's going to cause us to do two things. It's going to cause us to change our thinking in two ways. It's going to cause us to change our thinking about other people. If every other person I see, every other person I consider, every other person that crosses my field of vision, I begin to consider is possibly a God-bearer, then you bet they change in my mind. And how I approach them, how I see them, becomes something much different than my enemy or my threat or anything else. But the other thing that it challenges with us is it challenges our image of ourselves. It's easy to get mired in our shortcomings. It's easy to get caught up in what we can't do or who we are not. But if we see ourselves as Theotokos, as God-bearer, then we have to come to terms with the fact that we are created in the image of God and that we bear God. And that changes how we see ourselves. God-bearer. God did not choose the best candidates to do these jobs. Or maybe God did. God chose us. And God chooses us to continue to be His agents of incarnation in this world. And what a beautiful thing it is to be called by God. And what an awesome thing it is to be called by God. But my goodness, what a transforming thing it is to be called by God. We have 4 candles lighted this morning. It's Advent 4. Advent is almost over. Our season of expectation and anticipation of celebrating the birth of God into this world comes to fruition in just a few days. But our role as Theotokos will go on for the rest of our lives. May we be to each other and to God a blessing as we bear God in this